everyone. Thank you so much for joining the University of Toronto Mississauga's virtual campus tour. My name is Alicia Singh. I am a recruitment officer here as well as a recent graduate. I'm also joined today by two of my lovely colleagues, Jen and Saumya. So if you both would just like to take a moment to introduce yourself, we'll start off with Saumya first.
Sorry, I realized I couldn't hear you. So hello, my name is Saumya. I am a fourth-year student here at the University of Toronto Mississauga, and I'm also one of the student ambassadors for the Student Recruitment Office, so I'll be giving you a little campus tour today.
And my name is Jen Bryden. I'm the Occupancy and Admissions Coordinator here at the University of Toronto, Mississauga for student housing, so residents. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is all the things that we do over here in residence and how we can make your experience here at the university fun.
Thank you, both of you. So yes, for today's presentation, Saumya is going to be walking us through and giving us a little glimpse about her student experience. Jen will be then taking over and then sharing with us everything residents. Behind the scenes, we do have colleagues from recruitment and admissions, as well as residents, who are going to be able to help answer any questions you folks may have. So feel free to drop it in the chat box below. At the end of the presentation, I am going to be bringing Jen and Saumya back on live for us to be able to answer any questions you guys may have live. So either feel free to drop it throughout the presentation or wait closer to the end. So I will see you both very shortly. We're going to start off the presentation with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Craig River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Saumya.
Okay, fantastic. With that being said, hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today for this event. I'll just reintroduce myself really quickly. My name is Saumya. I use she and her pronouns. And like I said, I'm a fourth-year student here at the University of Toronto Mississauga. I actually originally applied for life sciences. So that's sort of my background. I'm sort of on the life sciences side of things. But my programs are listed on the screen there. And you can see that I'm, pardon me, you can see that I'm actually in programs that span across 3 different admission categories. So I'm in physiology, which is like a biology program that's part of life sciences. I'm also a neuroscience specialist, and that's part of the Department of Psychology. And then finally, I also study a chemistry minor, which is part of chemical and physical sciences. So I'll be taking you through this campus tour today, almost like a day in my life. And so what better place to start with a day in my life than with residence? So, as you folks can probably tell, I live on residence. I was actually a commuter for the first 3 years of university. So I would commute back and forth between my hometown and here. And this is actually the first time I'm living on campus. And I often like to joke that because most of our classes are online this year, this is the one year I didn't really need to live on residence. But regardless, I actually live here because I work on an amazing team called Resident Student Staff within Student Residence and Housing. So I work as a PAL, which is short for a peer academic leader. This is a photo of my amazing team here. And essentially, we are upper year academic leaders to help students with their transition into university and sort of the academic transition that comes along with it. So I actually lead what's called an LLC, so a living learning community for an upper year community of biology students. And this means that I get to provide really awesome specific programming for my students that involve more professional development, as well as some faculty interaction, which you can see here. This is one of our online faculty field trips that we've been doing throughout the year. And my students really seem to enjoy themselves, as you can probably tell. So I actually ended up getting my residence unit entirely to myself this year, which was kind of luck of the draw. I also am in a newly renovated unit in Putnam Place. So I feel like I kind of lucked out a bit this year because I'm a very independent person. So it definitely worked out in my favor. This is a photo of one of our common rooms, and although our common rooms are not in use right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I will say that the staff and professional staff, the student staff and professional staff are working very, very hard to make sure that students still feel that same sense of community and personal engagement that you get when you come to residence. And with that, I will just mention, I do know that Jen's going to talk about this really quickly at the end, but I will quickly mention that there are different styles of housing. So like I mentioned, I live in a townhouse style, and there are different styles like apartment style, maybe a dorm style if you're looking for more of a traditional dorm style room. And so you can also list your preferences when you're applying for residence on the STAR portal. With that, I would like to head over to our next stop. All right, so the Davis building is our largest building on campus. So there's a couple of things I'm going to talk about here. The first one being the UTM bookstore. So the bookstore is your one-stop shop for everything school related. So as you can see here, there's a bunch of school apparel here, but it's also your first stop shop for things like textbooks. So there are a couple of different options for students for their textbooks. And the reason I like to mention this is because I personally rented the majority of my textbooks. The UTM bookstore has a program where you can rent your textbooks for the year or for the semester, whenever you're taking the course, and then you just return them back when the course is over. It's cheaper. It makes if there's a guarantee that you can have that says if you damage the book somehow, there's no additional charges, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the reasons I really appreciated this was because finances were a big issue for me coming into university, and I tried to pinch every penny where I could. And so I definitely rented the majority of my textbooks. However, you do have the option to also buy them outright. You can buy brand new books, or you can rent books that are brand new. You can also buy used books that students have brought back to the bookstore, and those are often cheaper as well. I often personally went for renting used textbooks as this was the cheapest option. However, you can also buy out your books, which I did with this visual anatomy and physiology textbook here. This was one of my favorite classes that I took in university. It's a second-year biology course about anatomy and physiology, and I just loved the course so much that I decided I wanted to keep this textbook. So even though I was renting it at the time, I was actually able to buy it out for the difference in price between renting and buying. And it wasn't that much of a difference, and I'm glad that I still have it, because as I went on in my university career, it's really helped me with other courses. And so the renting option is really good if you think that you're not going to use textbooks for other courses. And there's also online textbooks available as well for different types of courses. Within Davis, you'll also find our newly renovated food court. So with the COVID-19 pandemic right now, our main food court here in Davis is open for grab and go options only. But I will say that whether you have dietary restrictions or you're just a picky eater like I am, there are so many food locations on campus to serve your dietary requirements or your food mood that day. And the Davis Food Court is actually where I spent a lot of my social time. As a science student, I would often hang out with my friends here, grab a quick bite to eat before I headed over to the science wing. So the science wing is also located in the Davis building. And as a life sciences student, this was really important to me because all of the science labs are actually held in the Davis building. And I like to think that you never know who you're going to meet in these sort of labs. For instance, I didn't know anybody coming into university, and these labs were of smaller sizes. There were about 24 students, so typical high school size class, I would say. And I didn't know anybody in my first year lab sections. I felt very, very awkward. And I just started talking to whoever's sitting next to me in my little lab group in first year biology. And you know, as history has it, she is now my best friend. Her name is Rachel. And, you know, I just say that you never know who you're going to meet in those sorts of classes. In fact, my research advisor right now was actually my TA or teaching assistant in first year biology as well. So it's a small world, I like to say. And speaking of first year biology, this is actually one of the labs that we get to do in first year biology courses. So these are some photos of skulls, and one of the labs you get to do is compare sort of the evolutionary aspects of these skulls and like find out like where a chimpanzee lies in terms of its relationship to a human, which I think is really cool. And so these labs, like I said, are about 24 students. So they're much, much smaller than some of the lectures that you may be going to in your first year, which can be as large as 500 students. That being said, even though a lot of courses are online right now and first year labs are currently online as well, there is still stuff happening in person. Like I mentioned, I'm a research student, so I do an undergraduate biology thesis project. I actually just finished this week, so that's very exciting. And I still get to go into lab and do some pretty fun things in lab, being safe, of course. And now I'd like to head over to our next building, which is the Innovation Complex. So the Innovation Complex, or CNEF Center, houses our departments of commerce, management, economics. So it's what I like to call our business building. But one of the most important resources inside the Innovation Complex is by far the Office of the Registrar. So this is a bit of an outdated photo. I'm not a third year anymore. Those are not my programs anymore, but I am still a student ambassador within the Student Recruitment and Admissions Office, which is a part of the Office of the Registrar. Now, the Office of the Registrar and Student Recruitment and Admissions are just one of the many offices on campus that actually employs students through their work-study program. So this is a program where students can apply to work up to a maximum of 15 hours a week within an office on campus or a department and still be a student, essentially. The whole purpose of this work-study program is recognizing that students' academics come first, but also recognizing the importance of gaining real hands-on experience. And just like with my team in residence, I feel so, so lucky, so, so fortunate to be working with such an amazing team in the Student Recruitment and Admissions Office as well. But enough gushing about that. I do want to talk about the registrar a bit as well. So the Office of the Registrar for current students is also their one-stop shop for everything advising related. So if you have a question about academic advising, your program, financial advising, general student success, there are these amazing student success representatives who are here to help you and will help guide you through some of those steps. And these folks all probably know my name by now because I go there a lot and I do ask a lot of questions, and they're very, very helpful and resourceful in that way. So I'm really glad to have that resource. And now we'll head over to our next building, which is the CCT building. So the CCT building is by far one of the liveliest buildings on campus when things are back to normal. I loved walking through this building, and although I didn't spend a lot of time in this building, I will say that one of my favorite parts of this was that there was always something happening in our CCT atrium. For example, there would be student clubs and departments and external guests that would table at an event like this to showcase their opportunities or to host an event like the Jack.org event that was happening here. And so this was one of my favorite parts about this building. Although I didn't spend a lot of time in here, it was nice to see that there were always campus groups that were engaging with our students. When I was in the CCT building, though, it was usually on my way to the library, which is connected to this building. So that's where we're going to head next. So this is our library. It is formerly known as the Hazel McCallion Academic Learning Center, named after a former mayor of Mississauga. But this is what we call the UTM library. And I often like to say that I wouldn't be a science student if I didn't spend a lot of time in the library. Not to mention, there is a very conveniently located Starbucks right outside. So the supply of peppermint mochas definitely helped fuel my studying when I was in the library. So one of the biggest resources I would say that was most important to me in the library is this reference and research desk. So as a research student, I'm actually able to book remote appointments with research specialists to help me to help guide me in my research as I go through this course. To help me find sources, to help me identify how to best write a report, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a lot of courses in first and second year, especially, that help build the foundations for this type of reference and research skill that you would have to use perhaps in upper year courses when you're writing longer essays or critical articles. And so there is a research advisor in the library for every program, for every department. And so this is a resource that I highly recommend students make the best of, because I definitely used it in my first year, and it has led me to, I would say, success and up until now. And one of the other resources that we have is actually this informations and loans desk. So obviously the UTM library does loan out books, but it also loans out some resources that are really useful to students. For example, they loan out things like laptops. They loan out things like chargers for phones and laptops. They also loan out calculators. And I didn't know this until probably my second year. I wish I'd known it in my first year, though, because there was a time when I was taking a chemistry test, and it turns out I brought the wrong calculator. And if I'd known that the UTM library would let students borrow calculators just by showing their student card, I probably would have done a lot better on that test than I did, because I wasn't allowed to use that calculator. Needless to say, I learned my lesson, and it's really great that the UTM library does provide these sort of resources to students. That being said, I'm going to head over to our next building now, which is the IB building. So the IB building is actually called the Instructional Center. I know it's a little confusing. It seems like it should be IC, but we kind of just call it IB for short, kind of informally. So this is the only building on campus that doesn't actually house any departments. So like I mentioned, the Davis building is kind of the science building. You have the Kneff Center, which is sort of geared towards business programs, but the Instructional Center really only has classrooms, essentially. And so you might have a large lecture hall like this. Now, this is IB 110, and this is a popular room for most first-year lectures. This room typically houses 500 students. And so class sizes in your first year can range anywhere from 500 students down to 24 students, like I mentioned. And this is through the use of things like lectures, practicals, and tutorials. So practicals, like I mentioned, are things like formal labs. Lectures are a professor lecturing to you about the course content. And the tutorials might be smaller size classes with a teaching assistant or perhaps the professor themselves to go over more specific things about the content that they maybe couldn't address in a larger lecture. And so I find that this ranging class size has been interesting to deal with, especially with the transition to online learning. But one other thing that's important about the IB building is this UTM shuttle bus. The UTM shuttle bus can be caught right outside the IB building, and it's actually a free shuttle for UTM students to take down to the St. George campus. So whether you're taking a class at St. George, maybe you live in downtown Toronto and you want to go to the Mississauga campus to study, or you just want to explore downtown Toronto for free, this is a really, really great resource. I actually use this shuttle bus a lot when I was commuting in my first 3 years. If anybody knows the area, I am from Pickering, Ontario. If you don't know the area, it's sufficient to say that it's quite a long commute, and people were often surprised at how long I would commute to get to UTM. And so this actually cut down not only on my travel costs, but my travel time. Typically, it takes about 30 minutes, maybe up to an hour if there's a lot of traffic on the highway that day or if it's rush hour. But it is a really good, quick way and a free way for students to get to the St. George campus. And UTM students are allowed to take St. George courses, typically after their first year. I personally haven't had experience with it, but I've heard that it's a really great experience to do so as well. Now, back to the IB building. we have a lot of spaces in our IB building as well. So the library itself has study rooms and private study floors, or quiet study floors and private spaces as well. The IB building also has study rooms for 4 or more people. And because a lot of exams were held in the IB building, since it's only classrooms and lecture halls, I would often book those study rooms for me and my friends to study in before an exam. And then we would just go downstairs and write the exam in whatever class we were in. And so we do get to miss out on that experience a little bit, but the IB building is still open right now. And so you can see I was studying here on a very snowy day. Next, we're going to head over to our newest building on campus. So this is our newest building on campus. Its formal name is Manjiwe Nendamoinan. It is an indigenous term that means gathering of minds, and I like to think that's very appropriate for this building. Although I don't spend a lot of time studying here, I did spend a lot of my social time in here because, as you can see from this photo, it is beautiful. I spend the majority of my time on the north side of campus, and as I mentioned, I spent a lot of my social time here. I would typically just hang out with friends in between classes. This is where I would do maybe group study sessions where we didn't need a quiet study room. They had this awesome little bistro cafe as well, which is unfortunately closed right now, but I used to go there every day for their hot chocolates. This building typically houses social sciences departments as well as humanities departments. So if you're interested in things like social sciences, poli-sci, sociology, that sort of thing, this may be where you would find your departments. Although as a science student, I don't spend a lot of time here. It is very beautiful, so I spend a lot of time here just in my social life. This building is actually connected to one of our other northern buildings on campus, which is called Deerfield Hall, which is where we're going to head next. So this is Deerfield Hall, and it's actually named so because in the forest in front of this hall, you can often see our famous UTM deer kind of roaming around, especially in the colder days where they need to come a little closer to get some food. It's very, very cute. I often actually see deer roaming around my residence as well, so it's just nice to see them hanging out. So this hall houses 3 very popular programs of study, I would say, for admissions purposes. One of them is computer science, mathematics, and statistics. One of them is psychology, and one of them is theater and drama studies. So the theater and drama studies, basically classrooms, are the theaters that are on the first floor. And so when I was hanging out in Deerfield Hall, I would often see them running around in between classrooms for rehearsals. It was always really fun to see what they were up to. But as a psychology student myself, I spent a lot of time in this building for things like labs. So the first year psychology labs are held in this building. And I often also came here to study because there is a Starbucks on this side of campus too. Although you can't see it in this photo, there is a Starbucks here. And I always liked the fact that no matter what side of campus I was on, whether I was in the library, I was on the north side of campus, I could always get that peppermint hot chocolate to keep me going for the rest of the day. And now I'd like to move on to our student center. So our student center is quite literally the hub of all student life here at the UTM campus. This center houses all of our clubs and societies, as well as our UTMSU, which stands for the University of Toronto Mississauga Students' Union. It is a union formed by the students, for the students, and they provide a lot of amazing programming for UTM students, both undergraduate and graduate students. So I'm actually a member of an academic society myself. I am a senior events coordinator for the Arundel Biology Society. And that is an academic society specifically geared towards students in life sciences and biology. All of the academic departments do have a academic society associated with them. So if you're interested in getting more involved with like your department, but you don't quite know where to start, going to those events and meeting people in your program through those events is a really, really great way to make good friends and to get involved with your department. A lot of the clubs offices are also located here, and clubs are started by students. I promise you, there is a club for everything. We often have our clubs week in the first week of school for students to come out and see kind of what clubs we offer. And if there is not a club that you're interested in, I promise you can start one. There is even a Quidditch club, which I was very, very inclined to join. Another cool thing about the Student Center is we have our very own pub called the Blind Duck. I will say that it is probably my favorite food on campus, as well as some of the cheapest food on campus. So I go here very, very often. It is open for takeout only as well. And this is typically where I'd end my day. Just go and grab some bubble tea at our cha time, which is also located inside of our Student Center. In fact, I think after this, I'm going to go grab some because I'm starting to crave it. But with that being said, that has been my campus tour, my day in the life, whatever you want to call it. And I'd like to invite my colleague Jen to bring us all the way back full circle to talk about residence.
Thanks, Saumya. I loved hearing all about your campus experience and some of the lovely things you said about residence. Speaking of which, I'm going to get started by talking about residence and what your first year experience in residence will look like. And we'll start by talking about why you might choose residence. So according to an academic study, it's actually shown that there's a greater retention to second year and graduation, meaning those who choose to live in residence are statistically more likely to stay in the university longer. Additionally, for this year, there is easier synchronous learning because you're in the same time zone as your courses. You also have access to in-person communities and programming, which makes it easier to make friends and have in-person connections. You have the opportunity to experience more independent living with your peers with access to our many residence services, which includes maintenance, front desk staff, and our 24/7, 365 support from student and professional staff members. And lastly, you get to experience our wonderful programming that you would do in residence. And that's where I'm actually going to focus next. So some of the things that we have in residence to ensure that you're supported while you're here is Residence Council. So they're a student-led organization that represents students' needs and interests in residence. And they have run some fun events this year. They've done things like a Movember contest. They've done candygrams. They've done bingo nights. They're really making sure that your residence experience is a positive one. We also have a large-scale orientation and Frost Week program in residence, which consists of things like the Get Experience Fair, some coffee houses. So for those who are our talented singers can perform. We have things like Res 101, Kenny Casey, a bunch of different events that we run in orientation. So that's September when you arrive, and then as well as in Frost Week, so in January when you come back from the winter break. Additionally, we have a few LLCs. So those are living learning communities in residence where students in specific programs can choose to live with people of the same program. So we have LLCs for the CCIT program, computer science. Foundations means foundations of research. So if you are interested in research at any point in your university career, this might be a good LLC for you. LEAF is Leaders of an Environmentally Aware Future for those who are interested in sustainability. Life Sciences for the Life Science program. And our last new one is the Global LLC. And that's for any student who's really interested in making global connections. So with students all over the world, either international or domestic, coming together. And that's one of our newest LLCs that we're really focusing on making a big hit this year. Additionally, we have a group of wonderful student staff who are always available for support. So our DOMs, who are like your first friend in residence, are there for community building, support, and creating connections. Our PALs, which is what Saumya may have talked about, our peer academic leaders, are your academic support in residence and really help facilitate the transition academically from high school to university. And lastly, our RSAs, our resident services assistants, work at the resident services desk, and they are your administrative support in residence for any logistic or support you could need pretty much with anything in the university. They can answer pretty much any question or at least direct you to the correct people if needed. We also have a bunch of great programming and clubs in residence. So we do have an artistic resource team. We have an equity outreach network. We have choir, and their group is called the Home Notes for any of our, again, vocally talented folks. We do have Coleman Cup, which is more of like a competition between our resident students that happens every Sunday. And lastly, we have the Sustainability Committee, again, for our environmentally friendly folks. We also have a video from one of our students who's currently living in residence this year, who really talks about her experience in residence and some of the things that she did to make sure that she was getting involved while here. So I'm going to have Jess throw that into the chat so you can check it out on your own time. Her name is Isabella, and she talked really eloquently about all of the things that we're doing in residence, especially this year. The other things I do want to highlight is some safety practices that we did this year, especially related to the pandemic, and things will be potentially carrying forward into next year as we will be following public health guidelines. So this year we did an increased rigorous cleaning schedule where we had 7 days a week. Our caretaking staff were cleaning, especially our lobby area, so anywhere where student traffic might be heavier. We did provide single rooms for all students, and we will be carrying that forward into the upcoming year. We put hand sanitizing stations in all public indoor spaces. We gave out free branded masks. So the University of Toronto gave out branded masks, but Student Housing and Residence Life also gave out our own branded masks. And so all of our students really got masked up when they were here. We had plexiglass barriers for our student services, so our front desk. So our front desk staff felt safe, but also students who were interacting with them. We had a self-reporting web form. So if you were experiencing symptoms in residence, you could fill out that web form and get assistance from our residence life staff to see what next steps would look like to ensure that you are feeling safe and also your peers are also feeling safe. We did a bunch of other things that are listed on the slide right now, but the last thing I did want to highlight is our health screening. So upon moving in, we did have health screening to make sure that when you were moving in, you would have been safe so that the students who are currently here and our student staff and our staff here felt safe. So the next thing I'm going to highlight is our different residence styles that we have here and what you would be selecting of where you want to live in your application. So the first two I'm going to talk about are suite style. So there's suite style single and suite style super single. So suite style single is in Roy Ivor and the super single is in Arundel. The layouts are pretty much the same, where you have 2 bathrooms, 4 bedrooms, a kitchen and a living area and some storage space. The difference is in Arundel, you have the furniture for 2 people in 1 room. We're not removing the furniture for the upcoming year. You'll just have extra furniture in there because we are still going to only have 1 student in every bedroom for the upcoming year. So that means that you'll be sharing a bathroom with only 1 other person if you were in a style like this, because there's 2 bathrooms for 4 people. And there is laundry and common spaces within the buildings for these areas. The next 3 I'm going to be talking about are traditional singles. So that's Oscar Peterson Hall, and they're more like dorm style units if you've seen them at other institutions, where it's 1 bedroom with a bathroom in between and you're only sharing that bathroom with 1 other person. In traditional style, you do only have this space, so there's no kitchen or common area that's just for you or your roommates. We do have kitchens, and we do have a kitchen, and it's a building kitchen, so everyone in the building has access. And we do have common rooms, but again, they are for everyone in the on the floor. Same with the laundry. So really, when you're in OPH, the space that's provided here is what you get. So everything in that layout. The next style is the premium townhouse. So again, they're single and super single. Just a reminder that in that super single, you can see that there are 2 beds and like that double furniture. But we will only be placing 1 person in that bedroom. So you would be only sharing that shared bathroom with 1 other person. In the townhouse, it's a kitchen, a living area, the bathroom, and a bunch of storage space. So again, you're sharing that entire space with just 1 other person if you're living in there. Now, I do want to run through the application timelines just to give you an idea of how to apply and what that looks like. So the residence application is live on StarRes. It's at residence.utoronto.ca. Anything that you have to do with applying is on this website, so it's very handy. The residence guarantee actually requires you to have done do three things. The first timeline or deadline, has already passed, and that would be March 31st, the residence guarantee application. It's okay if you've missed it. It really just, and you can still apply to residence. It really just means that you'll have lost the guarantee, but you could still get a space. It's just you're not guaranteed a space. If you've done the March 31st deadline, your next thing that you have to do is accept your offer to the University of Toronto by June 1st. So regardless if you hit the step 1 deadline or missed it, the next thing everyone has to do is accept their offer of admission by June 1st. Once you've accepted your offer, step 2, or the UTM undergrad academic year application, is available for you to complete. In this application will be things like selecting same or mixed gendered housing, indicating your personal information. There's an application fee, a $350 application fee, and you actually select the preferences of where you want to live. So I'm going to have Jess post in the chat a video about how to complete step 2, and it literally runs through every step of that application and what it looks like and how you'd be filling it out. So it's a really handy tool if you want some like step-by-step guides on how to fill that out. If you've done all of those things, you'll officially have the residence guarantee, and on June 16th, you'll get confirmation emails that will include your offer. If you've missed the guarantee deadline, you might still get an offer, or you'll get an offer to be on the wait list. Between June 16th and July 2nd, that will be your opportunity to accept your offer. So if you accept your offer, you will have to pay $1,650 acceptance deposit, and that'll be due on July 2nd. And then if you accept your offer on July 21st to July 23rd, you will receive room and roommate information. Now, I just wanted to highlight what step 2 actually looked like. So again, that UTM undergrad academic year 21 to 2022, that is the application you're looking to apply to. And it would be under My Applications if you have done the step 1 properly. If you missed that deadline, when you click Apply to Residence, it should be there for you. And whether or not you've accepted your offer will depend on whether you can pay the $350. But that will all be in the step 2 video that Jess has posted in the chat. The next thing I wanted to highlight is the residence fees. So this is a chart of all the different fees and how much each style of housing that I went over costs. So something I wanted to highlight is that all fees are actually less than $1,650 and $350 application fee. And what that means is before you even arrive to residence, you'll have paid $350 to apply and $1,650 to accept, which means you'll have paid a total of $2,000 before arriving to residence. Now, if I got Oscar Peterson Hall, for example, as my style of housing, I will have $9,372 left to pay because I'll already have contributed that $2,000. So that's how that works. And something else to highlight is that these fees actually do not include meal plan, but meal plan is required for all students who are living in residence. And Jess will post information about meal plans and where to contact them if you do have questions, because they are the best people to answer that. Last thing I did want to highlight is just if you do have any questions, you can contact us. So first, a reminder that application is live on residence.utoronto.ca. If you do have questions for us that maybe we don't get to today, you can email us at resdesk.utm@utoronto.ca. You can call us at 905-828-5286, or we do have a live chat available when our desk is open, and you can just visit our website and our front desk staff will be available to help. We also have social media, so please connect with us there because we post lots of our fun stuff. If you really want to understand the vibe that residence has, that is a great place to check out. And one last thing I did want to highlight is we do have some online events that residence will be hosting, and I'll have Jess post the link for how you can learn more about that in the chat. However, I am now going to bring back Alicia and Saumya as I'm done the residence portion of this tour.
Thank you to both of you for sharing all that information. The chat has been super busy. We've been getting a lot of questions, so we're just going to dive right into it. I'm going to rotate between the two of you. First off is going to go over to Saumya. So we are getting a lot of questions regarding how was your experience with getting involved with extracurricular as well as studying online?
That's a great question. And I know that that's something that's been on a lot of folks' mind right now in terms of how to get involved. I know that when I first applied to university back in grade 12, which for me seems like forever ago, I really wanted to attend a university that had the opportunity to engage with my community outside of just going to lectures, and especially so in getting involved in school and most of the schooling online. I found that really being actively engaged in those sorts of activities is very important. And like I would almost schedule in time to say, I'm going to go to my professor's office hours during this time to go and chat with them about the assignment, or, just talk about life, because typically not many folks show up to office hours. And so it's nice to just chat with the professor and get to know them. And in terms of other opportunities, something I'll mention is things like within residence, like Jen mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities to just get involved with your community if that's something you're interested in. Things like the Home Notes, which is our residence choir, which I'm involved in, so I have to put in a little plug for that. And Coleman Cup as well, which is sort of a competition-based thing. Going about it during the pandemic can be challenging. I recognize that, but I think that there's so many resources available at UTM, and the first step is to just kind of go looking for them.
Thank you. And I know Residence really does a great job at really bringing together community. So Jen, is there any sort of resources you'd love to highlight that Residence has done particularly really well for COVID?
Yeah. So Isabella does a really great job in that video of talking about some of the things that she specifically did to like get involved. And so I do want to highlight that again, just because it's a good firsthand student experience. But the other things I did want to talk about is in residence, we have several touch points with our students. So as specifically our student staff who continue to have one-on-ones with our students, regardless of the pandemic existing. And so they chat with you about pretty much anything you want to talk about. And that's kind of why we say that your Dawn is your first friend in residence. But there's also our other student staff. So our PALs and our RSAs are also great connection points for any student who is looking to make a connection, because what's great about all of our student staff is they're some of the most knowledgeable about campus and residence life and can guide you to things that might interest you. So like Saumya had mentioned, like if you love to sing, like your student staff might suggest checking out the residence choir and making a connection with that team. Or if we also have a Discord for our resident students. So if you're like really into gaming, they might push you in that direction and say like, there's lots of students who are checking out that. So we really try to like hone in what our students' interests are and make sure that we're connecting them with the correct group, because we really focus on fostering a community in residence, ensuring that every student comes out with a friend, even through the pandemic.
I think that's so important to make sure that everyone finds something that fits for them. So I really enjoy hearing all those different opportunities that are available. All right, so passing this back over to you, Saumya, and this is a question that hits close to home right at this very moment, but it is, how can you get a job on campus and what are they? Can you tell us, what are you doing right now?
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm actually working on campus with both of the other folks that are here. So I currently work as a student ambassador team lead within the student recruitment and admissions office, which is a mouthful to say. But I basically, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, I work as a work study student. So this is an opportunity for students to get involved with working on campus as part of being a student. So you get sort of part-time hours, and all of the offices on campus are very, very understanding of that as well. So that's definitely an avenue that a lot of students kind of pursue. That being said, I'm also involved with residents as a peer academic leader. So this is a live-in position where this is a job on campus. I get to interact with my students, get to interact with the professional staff of student housing and residence life. And I do understand that they also have work study opportunities as well. And there's also a lot of casual positions that come up. There's actually a central website called the CLN network. So it's a website for University of Toronto students to go and find opportunities to get jobs on campus. And even within some of our partners like Chartwell's and the Starbucks that I love to mention, a lot of my friends do work at those opportunities as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved and make a little bit of extra money on campus.
Definitely. When I was a student, I really made sure I used the work study program. And what's really awesome is that it's available for both students who are domestic and international to gain that part-time experience. If one of my colleagues could leave a link towards the work study program so other folks could learn a little bit more about it, that'd be really helpful. All right, so since we are learning a little bit more about the experience as a science student, one question that really hits home to what you're doing right now is, do you mind sharing a little bit more about your research opportunities and the experiential learning you've done within your program?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about it. Folks who know me will know that I could absolutely talk about my research for hours, but I'll try to keep it short. So basically, in terms of approaching it within the pandemic and how how I went about getting those opportunities is actually kind of serendipitous in that there was just a professor that I knew that was looking and kind of said, "Hey, I'm not looking to interview anybody right now. Come and join my team." It doesn't often happen that way. Usually students would reach out to professors if they're interested to work with them. And I know that it's been tough for a lot of my colleagues and friends who are looking for those kinds of opportunities. But I will say that the University of Toronto has done an amazing job at making sure a lot of those opportunities are still available remotely. And in terms of experiential learning, other than research, I haven't personally had much experience with it. But as a recent alumni, I know that Alicia, you had a little bit of experience with it. Do you want to chat about that?
Yeah, for sure. So basically how it works kind of in the upper years courses, irrespective of which program you're in, there's something called seminar courses. Seminar courses allow you to really have an experiential learning opportunity that's in a smaller class setting, but allows you to really work within the community. So for me being a science student, I was able to work on a public health initiative in which my team and we came up with a huge protocol, did a lot of research to figure out what was happening in our community that we could work on, developed an entire assessment towards it, and we actually were able to partner with one of the local district school boards to try to get momentum going on this project. So there's definitely so many ways for you to gain that experiential learning experience. You can really build up your skill set, as Saumya has mentioned. There's a lot of different avenues for you to go about doing this. Research is one of them, but also doing other courses for academic credits are also another. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Saumya. All right, so passing this over to you, Jen, I'd love to get your experience on it first. Is how did you notice that residence folks were able to make friends with everything being online? I know you've mentioned all the different resources that are available, but when they are living on campus and things are kind of at a limited capacity, how have you noticed it?
Yeah, so the real benefit about living in residence is that regardless of if campus is on, like if course your courses are online or they're in person, you're living with your peers. So you're already going to be making friends because you're going to be living with the people that you're studying with, that you're working with, and experiencing that first year of university with. So I think like just in living in residence, there's already connection pieces for you with other students. And like you'll make friends with your roommates for sure, but even if that isn't some place that like you're finding your connections is with your roommates, residence is still offering all of our different clubs that I've talked about through the pandemic. So everything that I've talked about today is still being operated the same way, regardless of the pandemic. It's just things have been like moved online. So all of our clubs do have like meetings and things like that, and socials and opportunities for students to connect. And it's just really about making sure that you take the initiative to actually step out of your comfort zone potentially and get involved, because we have the events for you, and because they're online, they do require a little bit more of your involvement in making sure that you actually attend them. But for the most part, we do make a big effort in making sure that students are meeting people.
Perfect. Now I have a question for both of you. So we have all been there, and we know the transition from high school to university can definitely be tricky, depending on which avenue you like to look at. So I'd love to hear some advice that you would love to share from both of your perspectives on what would you give to a person who's entering into their first year on how to really go about this transition. We'll start off with you, Saumya.
Absolutely. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier in terms of the vast amount of resources that are available at UTM and how most students don't even know that they're there. And I would recommend just going and looking for them. That seems a little bit vague. One of the big things that I really love to push are our orientation events. In terms of that transition from a high school setting to a university setting, I know that I was really nervous about, what the academic transition would look like. And unfortunately, I wasn't in residence in my first year, so I didn't get that sort of peer academic leader support that would normally come with that. So I actually attended a lot of orientation events related to academic programming, and I attended a program called Head Start, where I learned about what first year lectures would be like. I got to write a mock midterm to see like what the differences would be. And so balancing that in terms of trying to find like your transition a little bit easier into that, I'd recommend those orientation events. And if one of my colleagues could put a link in the chat, that would be great. In terms of maintaining a social life, not only like I'll pass it on to Jen to talk a little bit about that as well. But one thing I will mention, especially in first year, is that you have so many common courses with the folks that are in your programs, because first year is very general. And so at some point, I started sitting next to a different person every time I was in class. And I just started talking to folks that way, just to say, hey, did you do this reading? Or, hey, how's your day going today? And you just build those connections a little bit naturally. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but you do get to see those familiar faces over and over again. Even when you're online, you do see those folks. I'm personally a first year biology TA, so I do a thing where I ask a kind of a normal question to my students before the lab begins. So I'll say like, I don't know, what music are you listening to right now? And then that gets a conversation going like in the chat. And so it helps to build those connections as well. But I'd love to hear Jen's perspective on this as well.
Yeah, so in terms of like maintaining that balance between like your academic life and your social life, it's definitely a constant concern and something that a lot of first years are nervous about. I don't think it actually changes into upper years. Like it's just always something that like you have to work towards, and it's kind of like that work-life balance. But really, as Saumya has kind of talked about, is just reaching out to the resources that are available to you are going to be some of the most beneficial things that you can do to support your well-being, as well as your academic life. So Saumya had mentioned specifically in residence, the PAL program is specifically designed to help this transition. So to really make sure that you are transitioning and getting that academic support that you really need. And they're also there for the social aspect as well. Like they have one-on-ones and also chat with you about whatever you want, have socials with their students. But specifically the Dons are also catered towards that as well. So reaching out to your supports, and also reaching out to your and making sure that like you stay connected with your friends in university that you will make, because you're all going through the same thing. And so sometimes it's really easy or really helpful just to have a sounding board for the things that you're all going through. And so maintaining those connections and maintaining those friendships will be really important for your first year career, but also through your university career, to make sure that you like do have someone that you are chatting with and making sure that you are staying connected with each other. And yeah, like I said, just making sure that you use the resources that the university provides, that residence provides if you choose to stay in residence, which I highly recommend, because we do a lot to maintain and ensure student success and a positive student experience.
Most definitely. I think also what I would love to add in there is that don't feel as if you have to do everything all in your first year. I think a lot of times we overwhelm ourselves in the sense that we need to get extracurriculars, we need to get good grades, we need to like maintain this huge social life, but do what works for you. Don't do stuff that other people are doing that you know just doesn't fit well for you. So that would be my alumni wisdom that I would love to share. Now, passing this over to you, Jen, and this is going back to residence, and that is, how do you guys find which roommate is the right person for students? Is there a form? How do you go about it?
Yeah, so UTM actually doesn't do, for your first year at least, you don't have the option to select a roommate. We place you based on a list of criteria. So that includes where you would like to live, because you do in your application get to select and rank the 5 options of where you want to live. And we do our best to ensure that we do get you into one of your top 3 options. And then we also take into other considerations like accommodation requests and same and mixed gender housing. So I mentioned that in the presentation, but I didn't really talk about it. So same gender housing would be everyone in your unit. So that means like your roommates would be of the same gender. Whereas mixed gender, you'd be placed in a unit which potentially has the option for people to be in a unit where people identify as a different gender than what you identify as. We don't have any like same gender buildings. I should clarify that. So the difference between the building and your specific unit, your unit could be same gender, but the building will not be. But yeah, we take those things into consideration and place you based off of that. So that in your first year, you're also meeting a bunch of different people and getting to know different pieces of your community and getting to know different people. The one thing we also do is if you do get placed in an LLC, that's obviously based on your choice. You can apply for an LLC. You will be placed with people who are also in the same program because you'll be part of that living learning community. So there's that like extra layer of things that go into that placement. If you do stay with us and you go into upper year housing, you do actually have the option to select your roommates. And so in your first year, you might make a bunch of friends, maybe in your community, maybe not, maybe like in a different building entirely. And that's actually great. We would love to see that. And then in your upper years, you can select to live with those people for the rest of your university career if you wanted.
It's good to know that there's still a lot of work behind the scenes to really make sure that people are actually getting individuals who they have some sort of common ground with. It's just not a random selection. So don't feel too afraid about that. So I am being mindful of time, and I know that we're coming close to our presentation. So I'm going to go into our very last question, and I think this is going to be very fitting. And I would love to hear from both of you. Why did you choose to attend the University of Toronto Mississauga campus? I'd love to hear from you, Saumya.
Absolutely. So this is something I've kind of touched on through all my answers, but when I was first applying, I really wanted to attend a university that had sort of this experiential side to it. You know, I wanted to get involved with my community outside of just the classroom. And when I was taking campus tours, the one that stood out most to me was UTM. And I like to call it almost the Goldilocks campus because we are one university, 3 campuses with St. George, Mississauga, and Scarborough. And UTM just felt right. When I was taking that campus tour, I could see people waving to each other in the halls, and it seemed like, you know, it's not that far of a walk between classes. Everything just seemed to fit. And to be fair, the nature around here is pretty beautiful as well. So I kind of attribute that. But all in all, I think it was just because I could see the kind of community that was built here and the kinds of opportunities that I saw here that I just didn't feel a connection to at other universities. So long story short, I like to get involved, and I think you can hear that from my answers. But I'd love to hear about Jen as well.
Yeah, so when I was first applying to the universities, so I'm obviously not a student anymore, but when I was a student, some of the things that I was looking into for my institution was programs. So I really cared about my program, and UTM offered the thing that I wanted to do. At the time, it was education. I don't believe UTM offers the same education program that it does anymore, but at the time it did. I also love the university name, like obviously the name, but like the reputation that the University of Toronto has. And regardless if you're in Mississauga or downtown or Scarborough, like you carry that reputation with you, which I did love. But really, like those things were kind of like the things I was looking at before I even came to the school. And then I came, I did like a tour, and really similar to Saumya, like UTM just met my vibe check. So residents looked so engaging and so fun. And when we did our residence tour, I remember we actually got to talk to a student who was like living in residence, and they just like seemed like they like loved their life. And as Saumya had mentioned, like it's beautiful. Like UTM is like a little safe haven separate from the hustle and bustle of the city, downtown. And I really liked that, coming from a small town to come into Mississauga, but still have access to downtown through the shuttle if I wanted.
My sentiments are definitely a mesh of both of yours. So me being a commuter student, I actually live and I like went to high school here in Mississauga. So I always knew I wanted to go to U of T, of course, because the #1 university in Canada. But my heart wasn't set on the Mississauga campus. It was more for St. George until I came to the Mississauga campus, and I was like, actually, I came here for the March open house, by the way. And I came here and I was like, actually, I don't see anybody from high school here. Everyone here is like completely brand new, all strangers. And I was like, yes, I can definitely meet so many people. It's super close to my house, great for commuting. So I was like, all right, I have nothing to worry about. So it's definitely a huge campus within a small little area. And as Jen mentioned, it's super contained that it feels as if you're your own little like bubble, but you're super close to the city life. So I think that's great. We get best of both worlds. Well, this comes to the end of our presentation, and I want to just thank everyone for being so active in the chat, for asking so many great questions. If we weren't able to answer any of your questions, feel free to contact our office. One of my colleagues will definitely put the information down below. But thank you so much for tuning in and listening to both Saumya, Jen, and myself. We really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye.